Joining me now for her reaction to today's federal budget is the Conservative Interim Leader, Candice Bergen. Ms. Bergen, thanks for joining me amidst what's a very busy day in the Canadian political sphere. Perhaps we can obviously start out with one of the major parts of this budget, obviously the supply and confidence deal between the Liberals and the NDP that was reached a couple of weeks ago. That has been reflected in today's budget with new dental care programs. There's $5.3 billion in the budget to create dental care programs. First of all, I guess give your reaction to the announcement of a dental care program in the budget today.
Well, let me start by saying this budget is an NDP budget. It's delivered by an NDP Liberal government, but it's very obvious that what the Prime Minister has done is taken the money that he's been collecting from Canadians over the last year who are suffering because of massive inflation, and he's using that money to pay for programs that he's promised to the NDP. The dental program is one of them, and I can tell you that Conservatives have no problem seeing low-income families, children receiving dental care. We just don't believe that it's a federal government or this federal government, any federal government, that should be delivering that. Provinces have some programs in place in certain provinces. We believe the federal government should make sure that the transfer payments to provinces for healthcare are adequate, and then allow the provinces to provide programs like dental coverage for low-income families. We also are very concerned when you look at some of these programs that they're announcing. This spending won't stop, and these programs are permanent programs, and they're going to end up costing a lot of money. And the provinces already have the jurisdiction to implement them.
Obviously, the budget was unveiled today, but another very big crisis happening is in Europe, in Ukraine, and in Russia. And obviously, that's another situation that various people are, basically everyone is keeping their eyes on. That was also reflected in the budget today. There was $500 million in military aid to Ukraine, and then an additional $1 billion in what is described as new loan resources to the Ukrainian government. Perhaps give some of your reaction to that amidst, obviously, this is a very important time, and the crisis in Ukraine is very relevant. And so, again, speak a little bit about that.
Well, Conservatives have been very supportive and, in fact, encouraging the government to provide support to Ukrainians and amidst this conflict. We've been very vocal in our condemnation of Putin and his aggression. I would say that the announcements are good. We, though, would like to see them do more in terms of some very specific things that President Zelensky has asked for, specific weapons that he's asking Canada for. Canada said that we would give those weapons to Ukraine, and we haven't done that. So I would say our concern would be it's one thing to put out a press release, it's one thing to make a promise, it's another to deliver on it. So we will be watching the government and encouraging them to deliver on the commitments that they're making to Ukraine.
And separate from the spending that is being provided, the aid that is being provided to Ukraine in this budget, there's also an additional $8 billion for new defense spending for the government. I was watching you at the podium today giving your immediate analysis just after the budget was announced, and you spoke a little bit about that, but perhaps speak a little bit about the new defense spending a little bit further and your reaction, I guess you could say, to that.
Well, Conservatives proposed a motion yesterday on the floor of the House of Commons, and it passed. And it called for the government to meet its obligations in defense spending that we have. We recognize that it's a large amount of money that is going to take some time for any government to fulfill. So we're happy to see the increased spending announced today. I guess our disappointment is because overall the Liberals have been irresponsible in their budgets. When things are good, they don't manage money well, and then when crises come, for example, the pandemic or the invasion of Ukraine, which has made many governments realize they better bump up and bulk up their defense spending, the Liberal government doesn't have the money that they need. And so although the amount that they announced was good, we're glad to see it. We want to see it fulfilled. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the government's actually already made commitments of about $10 billion in defense spending that they haven't done anything about. It hasn't gotten to buy the equipment that our men and women in uniform need. So we're happy to see the announcement, but we want to see results.
In terms of obviously you and your conservative finance critic Ed Fast and numerous other MPs within your party have been talking a lot about the idea of fiscal responsibility. The finance minister, based off of this budget today, they gave kind of a timeline as to when the deficit, et cetera, will begin to lower by the year 2026 to 2027. It's expected it'll be at negative 8.4 billion. So perhaps give your analysis to that.
Well, the current Liberal Party has a problem. They are unrecognizable from who they were even 10 or 20 years ago. They have moved so far to the NDP ranks that I think this budget, they realize that even people within their own party are looking for them to show some responsibility. I don't have a lot of faith in the projections. I don't have a lot of faith in their numbers. This is the government that has doubled the deficit since taking power. This is the government that has increased permanent government by 50%, 25% just over the last 2 years. They have taken the windfall that they've gotten over the last year of $39 billion from consumers, from people who are paying taxes every time they fill their tank of gas, paying taxes on essential items, seeing the cost of housing go through the roof. The Liberals have taken Canadians' suffering and are using literally all of it to spend. So they have moved very far to the left. This is not a moderate Liberal Party any longer. And I don't have a lot of faith in their fiscal policy. And this budget is a reflection of that.
We've talked a little bit about what's been done and what was in the federal budget today, but in terms of what else you would have liked to have seen in the budget that wasn't in the budget, what would you have liked to see?
I'll tell you the three things we were looking for: controlled spending, which controls inflation; tax breaks for Canadians. We asked for even a temporary GST tax break on fuel, an end to the carbon tax. We would have been happy if it would have been even a temporary end to the carbon tax. And then we were looking for real solutions to the housing inflation crisis. Housing values have more than doubled in the last few years. It is almost unattainable for someone like you, or even someone who's maybe 10 years older than you, someone in their 20s, even 30s, to think about buying a house ever. And that's a tragedy. And that's because there needs to be more supply, more housing stock. So we wanted to see real solutions to that, not kind of band-aid government programs, which is what we're seeing announced. So those are three things that we were looking for, and we didn't get what we wanted.
And one final question before you go: you mentioned you would have liked to see more solutions to deal with housing. There were some programs in the budget today. There was $10 billion over 5 years on housing programs, $4 billion over 5 years to launch a housing accelerator fund, and then a one-time $500 payment to what the government says is to provide to people struggling with housing affordability. I guess obviously what I'm taking is you don't find that adequate enough. So maybe go into that a little bit more in detail, and some of the additional solutions that you would have liked to see on top of what the government announced today.
Yes, let's be clear. The biggest crisis right now is housing inflation. The value of houses is just accelerating at a very unsustainable rate. The way to solve that is we have to see the private sector build more houses. And in order for the private sector to build more houses, private builders, cities have to give permits and eliminate the red tape. So we didn't see a solution to that. Secondly, the government did announce some programs, sort of a blend of a TFSA, RRSP type of savings account. You have to have money to be able to use that. So you have to be able to save about $8,000 a year. You have to do that over 5 years, and then the program might help you. So the programs that were announced in order to help Canadians save, I guess, for a house, none of those will be implemented. None of them will see a house built or purchased in this year. So it did not address the immediate problems at hand.
Okay, that is Conservative Interim Leader Candice Bergen. Ms. Bergen, as I said in the introduction, good of you to make the time today amidst what's been, I'm sure, a busy day for you, and look forward to hopefully chatting again soon.
Great to meet you. Thank you for having me.